Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another edition of What Caught My Eye Hockey. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to all of our outlets to stay up to date with everything that we have going on. You can find us on Instagram, X, Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and YouTube.
All right. Welcome back to What Caught My Eye Hockey Edition, everybody. I'm the Bear here with my partner as always. I'll turn it over to him.
Hey, what's going on? What's going on, Scott? How you doing, buddy?
Good, how are you?
Yes, I'm good. I'm good. I'm reeling from a first round of playoff hockey, and with everything that gets wrapped up, tucked up nicely. We're recording on Sunday the 4th. Everything had gotten uh wrapped up and squared away last night, so we're set for the second stage coming up. But I think let's spend some time talking about what we saw in that first round and what
Yeah.
we're expecting moving forward, right? So you want to start with the Panthers, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're at this point and coming out of the regular season too, the clear favorite of mine to go all the way. And I know a lot of people like the Lightning. They're a really well-run organization. They've got a lot of good things going for them, but the Panthers did not make it look like it was much of a challenge. And
Yeah,
when you see
that's
someone that dominant against someone else who is a potential contender, I think that gives a lot of confidence to them going forward.
yeah. I mean, that's an absolute treat of a first round that we were spoiled to have, right? I mean, that's a big rivalry. I mean, we get a in-state Florida rivalry in the first round, and I would have killed to see that go all 7 games. But I mean, the Panthers making quick work of the Lightning in 5 games, winning 4-1. I mean, you're right. Once again, we're looking at a Florida Panthers team that is just dominating the conversation and setting the bar for, I think, what teams should be looking to do or replicate or expect in the postseason. And they're a force, man. They're an absolute force. And there's just so many
And
weapons
they're
to
still
talk
a feel
about.
good. Yeah, and just want to add in when you're talking about,
Hmm.
sort of the gold standard now. It's, I think, interesting to see where they came from. They were one of the most poorly run organizations in the NHL for a long time, basement dwellers. They were giving out
Hmm.
thousands and thousands of free tickets. They were tarping the upper levels. They were doing everything possible to make it feel like it, felt like a real stadium experience when they couldn't draw a lot of fans. And
Yeah.
to see them sort of reaching the pinnacle now is a testament to what they did, and I think a good thing for any downtrodden franchises out there like my beloved Flyers that it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, the feel good story is definitely a good way to put it, especially after getting it done last year. They're a team that's just continuing to deliver on like a good faith promise to the state, to its fans, to people watching at home. I mean, I catch a lot of flack for this from my brother, from my friends, but I love watching the Florida Panthers. I think
Absolutely.
everything they do, that's the kind of hockey I love to watch, right? They're a team that's not afraid to just bring the lumber and throw their bodies around and throw pucks at the net. They're a lot of times, especially in postseason, we don't see a lot of like glitz and glam and like flashy stuff. It's hard work and just banging. And that's really what they've
Yeah.
like the tough guy attitude is really like the foundation for their success right now. And it's so much fun to watch.
Yeah. And I think they have a very strong team ethos as well. They're not playing superstar puck out there. They're like, we're
Hmm.
here to win games. We're going to win the game however we can, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
And I think that is a core component of a winning mentality, especially in hockey.
Yeah, and I mean, I wasn't a huge fan. I think like when people talk about the Panthers leading up to this point, I would imagine somewhere in those conversations they bring up trading and getting Brad Marchand. And for a guy that's just an absolutely polarizing player, right? He's one of those like a Tom Wilson type, where like you either love him or you hate him, and it's usually
And that
like
usually
if
depends
you're
if you were a fan of that team or not.
Yes, yes. Like I'm sure. I'd be curious to see how like a Boston fan feels about Brad Marchand now. Right? Maybe they haven't really gotten to experience the receiving end of Brad Marchand yet, but I've never been a big fan of his, and I would imagine that like there were probably some guys on the Panther team that probably like felt victimized or slighted by Brad Marchand at one point, and now we're kind of seeing like the like a family mentality, and like you see like the team has fun with him. Like like one of the
Yeah.
traditions is like rats get thrown on the ice at Panthers games, and every like the players all just kind of like stick handle the rats, the silicone rats, and they like shoot them at Brad Marchand. So I mean, it seems like it's all good fun, and that they're enjoying having him. And like again, you make a 5-game statement against your in-state rival. I mean, yeah, there's good vibes all around in that locker
Yeah,
room right now.
hard to stay bitter when you're winning in that capacity.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and good for him. He's a guy who's won the cup before, has hoisted the cup before, and now he gets to go down and go from bottom of the barrel Boston Bruins to a legit contender and defending champion. So yeah, I mean, good for Brad
Yeah.
Marchand, really.
And on a personal note for him, no state taxes in Florida. Got to imagine Massachusetts is one of the highest.
Yeah.
He's going to
Oh,
win on a lot of fronts.
yeah. That's I think that's the definition of a silver lining. So
You're getting paid the same amount, but you're making more.
yeah, there you go. So who does Florida get now in the second round? They're going to be matching up with Toronto.
Sounds right? Yes, it
Yeah.
is. They get Toronto, and Toronto, I mean, thank God for Toronto that they won a series because that is a tough place to lose, but I think they're going to get run over.
This is, I mean, again, you want to talk silver linings, right? Silver lining. Unfortunately, the silver lining is you got through a round in Toronto. The Toronto fans and
And
pretty
a bit
much
of a
all of
rivalry, too,
Canada.
with Ottawa.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And, like you could see like Toronto kind of get over the mental hurdles that they've experienced in the playoffs for years now. And they finally close out a series. They get to move on. They're not packing their bags or booking tea times yet, but now they're staring down the barrel and looking at a angry, motivated Florida Panthers team. Are you kidding me? Oh my gosh, I would not. I would love to be on the receiving end of a newspaper in Toronto right now because I would love to know what
Yep.
the mindset is of a casual Toronto fan. Oh my gosh.
I think it's probably not very forward looking right now.
Yeah, it's
It's
got to be
probably
some
being like,
like
we beat Ottawa, things are good.
Well, again,
And I think there is,
we talked about
good.
Toronto a little bit, me, Nick, and Stevie on the main show, and I had raised the point, like it's a good like that first round matchup, Toronto versus Ottawa. It's good for a couple reasons. One, they don't have to worry about a Boston or a New York or a Pittsburgh plagued them in the postseason in the past, right? Those guys aren't there. That's got to feel good. Two, in the past, Toronto has kind of carried the weight of an entire country in the postseason, right? So it's always been like, yes, other Canadian teams have been there, the Flames, the Vancouver last year for sure, but Toronto has always kind of been the mecca of NHL hockey in Canada. And I think that them getting another Canadian team in the first round is like a weight off their shoulders a little bit. I think they
Yeah.
benefit from that because now it's like at least we know a whole country isn't rooting for us, right? It's the pressure's off a little bit, but there's obviously still some like mental gymnastics that need to happen. I mean, it's a meaningful victory in Toronto, and now they need to just sharpen their skates and lace them up real tight for this
Yep.
next
And
round.
I think one of the other interesting sort of undercurrents with Toronto right now is that the fans are not happy with the price increases that the teams put in recently. I remember seeing
That's
this a couple of months ago, and I think
it's
they were
not
saying
fair.
that on average ticket prices had gone up almost 20% for season tickets across the board. So that's thousands of dollars for most people. For a team that
So
until recently had not been winning much.
yeah, but you know what? I understand it, and I think it's because I think maybe I'm a little more. I'll give the club the benefit of the doubt because, like, I'll liken it to being an Orioles fan, right? That team has just been so bad for so long, and so yes, I was super happy and excited to go to an Orioles game, a team that I love, and pay $35 to watch 9 innings of baseball. But now in the recent years, the team is better. The prospects have developed and are mainstays and big names in the whole league. So yes, I am willing to pay a better price or a higher price for a better product on the field. They have that team that the Toronto team is an absolute stud of a squad, and like I think it's a shame that we don't get to see more of those games in Virginia in America because for whatever reason, it's hard to find Canadian team games. We can talk about that later, but it's harder to find Canadian team games in America, and some of the best American-born players are playing in Canada. Connor Hellebuck, Austin Matthews, just
Yeah.
to name a couple. And so I can understand them raising the prices. They have lightning in a bottle up there, and
Yeah.
like they can't say they've won a cup, obviously. So I mean, like, but they have one of the better products out there. They have possibly one of the only guys who could ever like come close to like, if you want to talk goal records, right? Obviously, Ovechkin just beat the goal record, but like Austin Matthews is an electric goal scorer. He almost put up 70 regular season goals last year. So yes, I'm gonna,
Yep.
if I'm the president of this organization, I'm gonna tax you a little bit to come see him, because you'll pay it, right? You'll pay to
Yeah.
come
That,
see him.
hey, that's a fair point.
I mean,
That's a
what are
fair
your
point.
thoughts on
Hopefully it'll
that?
work out for everybody. I think it's one of those, I think it's one of those impossible things to
Mm-hmm.
truly balance out. I think on one hand, I get the business side of it of saying, this is our moment. We're going to make what we can out of this, make what we can while we can. But I think the cynical perspective from the fan side is, as a lot of these teams go from being owned by, a family who's been in this town for a long time, to conglomerates, to private equity, to, all these different people who don't necessarily have local roots. And I actually am not sure off the top of my head who owns the Maple Leafs, but I think that's adding a level of cynicism to these price increases. So like back in the day, it was a local person usually who owned these franchises who it's like, hey, this is what it takes to keep the team running. And you're like, okay. And it's like, well, no, actually, we decided we want to make $45 million this year instead of $40 million, and ticket prices are going to make up $3.5 million of that spread across the fans. It's like, okay, that sucks.
So they are owned by the Maple Leafs Sports and Entertainment Ltd, which
Okay.
is a large sports and per the Google AI overview, it's a large sports and entertainment company that also owns teams like the Raptors and Toronto FC and the Argonauts.
Okay, so they seem
Rogers
Toronto
Rogers
focused at least.
Rogers Communication is a majority stakeholder in the Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment.
Okay. Yeah, so that's not bad. But even like as a Philadelphia fan myself, like Josh Harris owning the 76ers,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, okay, this guy doesn't care about Philadelphia. He's doing all these crazy things because they're the best thing for his business. He's either a private equity or some other, hedge fund guy. But it's like the fans see all this stuff, and it's like, okay, this isn't good for us. This isn't good for the team. This isn't good for the community, but it's great for you. So I think there's some level of cynicism there
Yeah,
that can develop.
but yeah,
But again,
no,
like
it's fair.
Toronto is one of those bigger cities too, like New York. You're never going to pay reasonable prices at Madison Square Garden for anything, regardless of who owns it.
Yeah, I can understand that. The what I did enjoy about watching in this Toronto series, this Toronto Ottawa series, was Stolars, the Toronto goalie.
Former
My
Flyer.
gosh, that guy is a beast. That guy, there were multiple times where like if the Caps game was on commercial, or if if this was just the game I was like setting up to watch for the night, there were multiple times where I would flip over to that game and Stolars would be putting in some absolute work. Like I'm talking like clearing the crease on his own. Nick, Stevie, and I were recording an episode, and I had the game up on the other monitor, and I had to cut Nick off because this dude is just shoving dudes out of the crease, hitting them, checking them. Oh my gosh, that guy's an animal.
And he's a big guy, if I remember correctly.
Yes, he's a tight end, if I'm not mistaken. I think Stevie pulled it up. He's like 6'6", like 250 or something like that.
Yep. Yep, 6'6", 243.
That's
Yeah, because he was a Flyers goalie for a little while. And I was like, man, it does not hurt to have a big goalie who can move. And obviously the Flyers didn't keep him, but
we talked a little bit about that. It's something I've kind of been looking at, like I like Stevie was wondering like what the heck, like how do you even find a goalie of that size? And I made the point, I'm curious to see what you think. I said, well, like I think those kind of goalies are going to be a little more prevalent if you can find the athletes, because since the Lightning had such great success with Ben Bishop and Vasilevsky, goalies of that size I feel like would be more the norm. The league average is I think still like 6'3", 6'4", like 220, but like I don't think big goalies like that are as rare as they used to be.
yeah. I think that everyone wants that goalie. I think the filter makes it hard, or the funnel, if you want to call it that, because to be that tall, then you also have the flexibility, which,
Mm-hmm.
as someone who tests out goalie a couple times, it is
Yeah.
painful for an average person. And tall
Yeah.
people tend to be less flexible, and obviously it's something you can work on. And then the mentality Like, I think mentally, the mental makeup you need to be a goalie in hockey is one of the most resilient makeups in all of professional sports.
Yeah.
Like, there are things that are happening that are totally outside your control that you're blamed for or not blamed for. So to be able to just like be the goldfish when you need to be, but then when you're streaking, to keep that in mind and keep that streak rolling is such a, I think, a rare trait.
Yeah. No, that's yeah, and I think you're spot on. I mean, we talked at length last time about, you know, how you just need to be like an absolute psycho because like you
Yep.
feel all of it.
Yeah, and you get
You
bruised by all
feel
of
it.
it.
You feel everything.
And people, and having someone skate into you full speed while you're standing still is terrible in any circumstance. It's worse when you're also trying to stop the puck.
Yes, yes. When you have an ulterior motive to surviving the hit.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
we got Toronto and Florida. What are your predictions for that series in round two?
Yeah. Ugh, I think Florida.
With
I
all
don't
due
think
respect to
Toronto's
Toronto.
got. I mean, I don't. I just. I think the Lightning are better than Toronto, and I think Florida is feeling it right now.
Yeah.
I think they are locked in the zone, and they're not. I don't think Toronto's ready, and I think Toronto has a little bit of that cathartic hangover of finally winning a round,
Oh,
winning
we
against
did
another
it.
Canadian team. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I
and
think that
that Ottawa team is scrappy too. Like, and they, you know, they put every bit of blood, sweat, and effort into that
they made
series,
them
and
earn it.
Toronto has to be feeling it. Toronto has to be feeling
Yeah,
it.
and they played an extra game, and they probably had to skate further, skate faster, work harder than Florida did against Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
And again, I hope it's a great series. In all these series, you want to see competitive, fun hockey,
Yes.
but sometimes that's not what you get.
So in that breath of talking about Florida and their competitiveness, I almost forgot to bring this up. I promised Nick that I would ask you. The Ekblad suspension.
Yeah,
We want to know what your thoughts are. I don't know if you listened to the episode or not, but I tried to put myself in the shoes of the Department of Player Safety and analyze the hit from that standpoint. And if you haven't listened, awesome, because then I can kind of give you my breakdown of it. But I'm curious. I want to hear what your thoughts were
yeah.
on
If
that
you want to just
Ekblad
start with
hit
yours, just so
and the suspension. Yeah, so I said watching it in slow motion and watching it from the angle of like the stands looking down onto the hit. I again like pretending I work for the Department of Player Safety. Here's what I would have said justified the suspension. He brings forward momentum in to initiate the hit, and as he closes the gap to initiate contact, he brings his right arm up, and as the arm that comes up is the first thing that makes contact, and it makes contact with it was Brandon Hagel. He makes contact with Brandon Hagel's head, and
hmm
Hagel on the side of Hagel doesn't move. He doesn't make any sudden movements. His head doesn't change positions leading up to the hit. And so to see Ekblad come in, raise his arm, initiate contact with his arm to the head, it looked like it would have been an avoidable situation had he not brought his arm up to initiate that contact. And that's why I think they
yeah,
gave him 2 games. On the unofficial side of it, I also think Ekblad is also being the target because he just came back from a 20-game suspension. So I do think that there's a little bit of bias there, right? You just came back. You missed the first 2 games of the playoffs. We're watching you because you violated the PED policy. So I don't think he's necessarily being officiated or adjudicated the same as any other player because he does have a history of suspensions. So that was my take on it. As a fan, I would have a hard time saying like, oh, it's rigged. You know, it doesn't look good. I don't think the hit looks
yeah,
good. But
yeah. So
yeah. What do you think?
my overall take on it is raise as soon as you raise your arm in a body check and you touch someone's head, you're in the suspension realm,
Yeah.
particularly in the playoffs early in the series. And I think that the player, the suspension is twofold. Player safety is important. Additional
Mm-hmm.
hits to the head are bad. And doing it in that way is harder to avoid. And realistically, not much more effective than hitting with the shoulder, except he was slightly out of position from my viewing of it. Like he
Yes.
couldn't get his shoulder to the head the way I think he wanted to make a statement with that hit. And
Mm-hmm.
when he got there, he was too far out, so he throws his arm up, and the puck had moved on, so there's a chance the refs aren't watching.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I think as soon as you throw your arm up there, you're in line. And again, coming back from that suspension, I think does matter because everyone's talking about you. You're in the news. So the refs are already thinking about you more than they naturally would.
Yes.
And I think that's, a human condition. But I don't think that, I think I don't think it's necessarily a bias or an unfair perception to be keeping an eye on people who tend to be perennial offenders in a variety of manners.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think it was a very justifiable suspension, and I think that it's a good stance for the league to take at this stage because of that. It's one of those things where like playoff officiating is always different than regular season officiating, I think, in every sport. But
Yes.
hockey, is as a contact sport with a little more flexibility than other sports, I think has more of that. So if you sort of set this is the level we're going at, the next thing that happens is going to be sort of above that. It's going to escalate, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you need to maintain control, and we saw that in a couple of different series where there was some sort of page like exclamation point moment, and the following game you see the refs call a tighter game. If you're fine, we can move on to the next series that we want to talk about. I was good with this transition kind of already set up. We can talk about the Caps in Montreal because there was that moment in the Caps game when it was game 4 or game 3. I can't remember whichever one Wilson laid out Carrier in. I think it was game 4. It was an
Yeah.
exclamation point. It was an exclamation point hit. It turned the tide of the game. And prior to that, there was a lot of extracurricular stuff going on where the Montreal guys and the Caps guys were just jawing at each other, shoving. It seemed like after every whistle, there was something going on that the cameras had to pan to and catch up to. And eventually, it escalated to Josh Anderson and Tom Wilson pretty much fighting and wrestling with a ref on the Caps bench off the ice. And at that point, I'm furious because the Caps got exposed because as emotional wrecks who have a hard time like maintaining focus. But two, I was pissed because it felt like the referees lost control of the game, and now in playoff hockey, the players are having to assert themselves to govern what is and isn't allowed by their standards. And the next game, after all of that madness comes out, the refs I think called like 7 interference penalties just to
Yep.
kind of announce we're here, we're in control, we're not putting up with any more shit.
Yeah.
And I
To
love
reset the
that.
level.
Yes, exactly. And I love that. I absolutely love that because like it's not often that I feel like it's not often that in professional sports you see something like that. And it's not I think a lot of other sports don't really have that kind of latitude, right? Like baseball absolutely doesn't. There isn't really a whole lot of discretion there for baseball. Football, a little more, but not quite the same. So that's one of the unique things about hockey that I really, really enjoy is that there's times where you can reestablish control of a game from an officiating standpoint. But yeah, that was a wild series.
It is. And I think one of like the interesting sort of cultural things about hockey relative to other sports sort of baked in there is it's a different relationship with the referees, I think, in hockey than it is in basketball, baseball, and football.
Mm-hmm.
Where like, because it's a smallish field, they're on skates too, but there's like this, they'll actually take the time to explain stuff to people, particularly in the lower leagues, less so in the professional leagues. But there's this baked in thing where it's like you just kind of don't, and like people will yell at them, obviously. Coaches yell at them all the time, but it's more tactical than personal. And I think that's interesting. Where there's much more, like you're saying, like that latitude where like I think the refs are interacting more often, more freely, more openly with the players and the coaches. So it creates a little bit of a different atmosphere where sometimes the refs are like, hey, we're going to let this go. Everything's fine. And then when they lose control, they'll be like, no, okay, nope, you guys can't handle this on your own anymore.
Yeah.
Have fun.
Yeah. Mom and dad
We're
need
the
to step
adults, we're
in.
stepping in.
Yeah. And I think that was a series where that was very, very prevalent, where the refs from game 1, it almost felt like the refs were like, you know what, we're going to let them play.
Mm-hmm.
And game 1 was a surprising physical statement from Washington. Game 2, they continued the same trend. And then game 3, Montreal decided that, you know what, we need to answer back. And instead of answering back during the course of play, they took it to throwing the Caps off and getting them to trade penalties or take penalties after the whistle. which isn't an unfamiliar strategy that we've seen in hockey before, right? I
Nope.
mean, I mean, the retaliation is a word in hockey for a reason, right? If you retaliate, you go, and so
And a lot of
Montreal.
times you go by yourself.
Yes. And so Montreal would instigate stuff after the whistle, particularly Gallagher. Gallagher was a guy who I think was living rent free in their heads for a little bit there, and he was getting people to go after the whistle. And the frustrations carried into the field of play during during actual game time, and the Caps paid a price for it, and they dropped game 3. Come back, they win 4, they win 5 at home, and now they're moving on, and they'll be playing the Carolina Hurricanes in round 2.
Yeah, and that's going to be a tough matchup for them. So hopefully they'll, take a beat to, collect themselves. And I do think Carolina is a bit less of a scrappy physical team than Montreal is. I think they're a little
Yeah.
smaller, a little more skills driven, but they've got a couple guys who I think over the course of a series can really get in your head still. So hopefully, the coaching staff, and I'm sure they have mental health professionals nearby to be like, hey guys, control your anger. Don't lose it on.
I'm pissed that this is the second round matchup, because I think this is a series that could go 7 games, because I think both teams have incredibly deep rosters that have at least one guy or two guys on each forward line that can threaten and score. And I can't say enough nice things about Rod Brindamore as a coach. I really, really enjoy Rod the Bod behind the bench.
Yep.
Great coach. I love him. I love his philosophy. I love his approach to coaching that Carolina Hurricanes, and he's carried them to like awesome successes, I think, by their standards, and like where they should expect to be year after year. But that's a series that I'm going to be very anxiously and nervously watching. I am happy that they also wrapped their series up 4-1, so they've had a lot of downtime, just like the Caps have. That's
They're
something
not
that
coming in hot, engines fired, ready to go.
that's something that gets talked about a lot, not just in hockey, but I think like basketball for sure, baseball absolutely for sure, where you come into the series hot and you close it out quickly, but then you have to sit around and wait
And you lose
for
that. Yeah.
and exactly, it's time for you to like lose that mental edge and like forget, not necessarily forget, because there's no forgetting that you're playing in the playoffs, but just to kind of lose that sharpness. And the last thing you want come playoff time is to go immediately down 1-0, right? You want much rather be in control like that. But I was happy that the Caps are going to be playing another team that finished 4-1. So I think this is going to be a really good series. I mean, Carolina's series over New Jersey, especially after Jack Hughes goes down to injury, it was like almost like when Hughes goes down to injury, it was almost like this was just a done deal. Right.
Yeah.
It seemed
A
like this
foregone
was
conclusion.
this was Carolina's series to lose, right?
Yeah.
Like I think
And it seemed like they were doing just enough to get it done too. They were not trying to burn, too much fuel on the way.
Yeah. Again, and it's a team that just, I think Carolina is a team that knows how to win and knows what it takes to win playoff hockey and how to close out a series, because I think one of the hardest things to do in sports is close out a series, right?
Yeah.
Close out a playoff series, and Carolina has done that time and time again. I think that they're going to match up very, very well. The fan in me is going to predict Washington, but the realist in me thinks that this series is wide open just because of how evenly matched they are.
I think it's going 6 or 7, and it's anyone's series.
Yeah.
Great. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be a great next round, and hopefully, some really close series moving forward.
Yeah. So we've covered all the East Coast teams. Let's jump over to the West Coast. Let's start with Vegas. Vegas with a big 4-2 statement win over Minnesota.
Yeah, and
Sorry, I had to wet
they
my
looked
whistle.
great, but you're good.
Yeah.
They look great, but Jack Eichel was not in top form for most of that series. He
No,
bounced back at the end, and again, they got the win. They didn't suffer too much for it, but if they're going to try and go the distance, they really need him in top shape. He is their difference maker.
Yeah, he 100% unequivocally is. It's all eyes on Jack Eichel, and when he's on, the team is on. It's almost just like the team feeds off of it, right? They benefit from it, they feed off of it, and he's the kind of player that when he's playing well, it almost has like a motivating like calmness that it just infects the team, infects the locker room, because everyone else is elevated when Eichel's better. But yeah, I mean, like, good for them for closing out the Minnesota series. It's a tough break for Minnesota. I don't envy the Minnesota fans at all.
No,
It's
that's
heartbreaking, dude. It's heartbreaking for them. I feel for them 100%.
yep. And for a city and a state that loves hockey, probably more than any other one in the United States, it's
Yeah, it's tough, man. There was just some really, really bad beats there, and I think like the first thing that comes to mind is the goal that was walked back for offsides. I think that was in like game 1 or 2 or something like that. It was early on in the series, but it's just a tough it's a tough break, and it's a good example of mental lapses and not being locked in on game day and how it can affect everything. Like it's you know as well as anyone, it's muscle memory when you're not the puck carrier going into the zone. You stretch that step out to toe drag that blue line, or you veer off sideways and get a wide stance just to make sure you're in contact with that blue line. And it looked just like a mental mistake that the guy
eh,
forgot to do it, or the timing was off, but it cost him.
it cost them, and I think it cost them long term too, in like mentality. I think that was like a real morale breaker almost of being like, man, we might just not have it.
Yeah,
Like,
it's just not our year, not our
like,
year, not our
and that's where you
series.
hope the coach steps in and is like, you guys can do this. We've been doing this all season. Get it together, figure your stuff out, and hopefully you have some strong leaders in the locker room as well to, try and pull everyone together. But when those mistakes start to compound like that, you can end up in a deep hole really, really fast.
Yes, you can. It's sad. I think like by Minnesota standards, I think getting there is a win. You're not happy with how you go out, but who is? You know what
Yeah,
I mean? But I think getting to the playoffs is a win. And now
for
it's
sure.
about coming into next season better than we were this season. If you're a fan of the Minnesota organization, or you're a part of the Minnesota organization, that has to be goal number one. Do better next year than we did this year. And I mean, good for them. It just sucks. And you and I were talking a little bit before the show. Vegas is one of those teams, ever since the expansion draft, they've been a playoff regular. I think I'm really thinking about it. I don't know if they've missed the playoffs since
I don't
their inception.
think so. We'd have to go back and check, but I'm pretty sure they've been very, and and we're going to dive into that a little bit in a segment later, but like, it's just one of those, it's amazing that an expansion draft like that can achieve those results.
So they missed in 20. They missed in the 21-22.
Okay.
But then they bounced back the next year,
Yeah,
because I
and
believe the
they won it
next
all in
year was when they went.
2023.
Yeah.
I mean, that's as good of a bounce back as you can ask for.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, Vegas is Vegas. I mean, I think that's a team that no one really ever wants to run into,
And it's
because
a
that
town that people struggle in. The Vegas flu is
yes.
a real thing.
Yes, it is. The Vegas flu. Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy place to play. It's not an easy team to play against. I think, like, again, off Jump Street, that's a team that's just cultivated a winning mindset. And
Yeah,
I also think that, like, we're probably going to be talking, we're, like you said, we're going to be talking about it in a later segment, but I think that's also like a team where, like when you have an expansion team, it's almost like we're creating this like team of like misfit toys, right? These are the players that are good enough that we want them, but not good enough that their old team didn't protect them. And so it's almost like you end up with you almost end up with a team full of guys with chips on their shoulders, right? That's time and time again. That's what I've likened Logan Thompson to on the Washington Capitals this year. Is that dude got traded while he was doing an autograph signing for Vegas? Like, this dude came into the season motivated. I'm going to show them what they missed out on. And so it's almost like that's what you get when you get like a first year expansion team, right? Is you get a bunch of
yeah.
guys who are probably pissed off and
Chips on their
motivated to show
shoulders
them.
and
Yeah,
team first guys. They're not expecting to walk in there and have the red carpet rolled out. They're
correct.
expecting to come in to earn it, to work and grind, and that's really what it takes.
Yeah, it's a fresh canvas, it's a clean slate, and I like go in there and earn your spot to be the guy, right? And Vegas, I think, again, just they've cultivated that so well. Like, good for them. I think it's
And
it's good for them, and it's good for hockey.
it's extra impressive too, considering where they're located almost. Like
The
you think about
desert.
how franchise fit cities, and so you think Vegas, you think glitzy, glam, show, all this stuff, and they've managed to get a culture that's very much just we're here to go to work,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's
Have you
awesome.
Have you been out to that stadium at all?
I've been to the stadium. I haven't been there for a game yet,
Oh, okay.
but it's a really cool stadium. And
It
I
is.
think that's an advantage too, getting to build a brand new stadium with like all the top of the line technology and like everything that people have learned in the last 50 years of how you control sound, how you build for the best views, how you do all these other things. I think just gives
Yeah.
them an extra leg up, which is nice.
I've talked to some people that have gone out there for games, and they've said that it's 60 minutes of great hockey with 40 minutes of like shows. Like, because they said that, like, it turns into like a big theater piece, like before the game, during intermissions, and it's a whole song and dance. I mean, it sounds awesome. I mean, the stadium's cool too.
Yeah,
I love seeing pictures of it and seeing like all the stuff they do there. It's an amazing venue. But yeah, I hope to get out there for a game one day. I think that'd be so cool.
absolutely.
So Vegas is going to be squaring off with the Edmonton Oilers after the Oilers close out the LA Kings in a 4-2 series. Let's talk a little bit about the Oilers here, because I have some hard opinions on them, but I'm curious to hear what you think about our Edmonton Oilers.
It's almost what you're talking about earlier with not seeing much of them. I haven't seen much of them this year. I mean, obviously they have,
It's a
the
West
best.
Coast Canadian team.
Yeah,
But
but they
yeah,
have
I
the
mean,
best player in the world, right?
McDavid, Draisaitl. I mean, it is a
Yeah,
team that it's a team that, like,
stacked top to
yes,
bottom.
it's
That
stacked,
consistently
but their
underperforms, I
their
think.
window is closing. Their window's
Yeah,
closing because they're either going to be in a spot where they're eventually going to be overpaying for these guys and they won't be able to bring in new talent because of how much they're paying these guys, or these guys are going to get pissed off of being close but not, like, good but not good enough, and they're going to want to go somewhere where they have a chance to win before their personal windows close. It's crazy because, I mean, like, that I have so many thoughts that just rush to the front of my head when I think about Edmonton and just how great they are, but it's criminal they haven't gotten the job done yet. It's
the
criminal. I
sheer
mean,
level of talent is unbelievable, but they, like you're
yes.
saying, they just can't get it done in the clutch, and
Mhm.
that's happened before. And honestly, like you could go put them into like a winning organization, and maybe they're the big difference maker. But I think too, at some point, when you're the best player in the world and one of the top, I don't know, 15 players in the world, you gotta do more in the when it really matters.
You
Like
absolutely need to do more.
that's the hardest thing, right? And like I think it's not a perfect comp, but an interesting comp almost. I feel like is Miles Garrett on the Browns.
Okay.
Incredible player, one of the best players in the league without a doubt.
Yes.
But is it and obviously the Browns organization leaves much to be desired in terms of stability, decision making, everything
Yeah.
else. But like I think he took a look at himself this offseason and said, is it me? Is it this organization? And is there a number that makes sense for me to just be like, okay?
Yeah.
And like you're saying, I think that's what they're going to run into, where like if they throw a big enough number at them, they'll stay and they'll be stuck. Everyone will be stuck. So I hope for their sakes that they either finally hit their breakthrough in the postseason or they realize they need to go somewhere else and find it.
It's just tragic to have that much, like, talent in the forward position, and then the further back you go in that lineup, the more scary it gets, because they're a team that can keep up with goals with
Mm-hmm.
anyone. They could keep up with Austin Matthews. They could keep up with Alex Ovechkin. I mean, they goal for goal they can keep up. But the issue is that there's so much pressure on the offense to score those goals because defensively, I think they lack defensive defensemen, and they certainly are lacking in acumen in the crease. I
Yes.
mean, it's just year after year we're talking about Skinner in goal, and just how come playoffs the guy can't stop a beach ball, and it got to the point where, I mean, good on the coach for throwing in Picard to, like, fill the void, but, like,
You got
this
to
is a
try
guy
something.
who's
Yeah.
exactly, you have to try something, but it's scary to have to rely on the goalie who's spent most of his career in the AHL to try and get the job done and keep it close for you. I mean, I'm glad that they got through this first game because LA looked like a buzzsaw of a team this year.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge feel good win for Edmonton. If you get
Yeah.
through LA in the first series, good for you. And
You got something.
but it's their path isn't going to be an easy one. You draw LA first. Now you have Vegas, and that's a terrifying series. If I'm on Edmonton, I'm staring across the ice at a Vegas Golden Knights team. That's terrifying.
Yeah. that's well rounded, complete all the way through, and again, there to work.
And I think that like that's a team that like it sucks when you have to rely on your defenders to score goals for you, because I don't think, and you might completely disagree with me, but I don't think if teams that have defenders as one of their top like point producers or goal scorers in a season are traditionally not going to have as much success in the postseason. I would imagine teams that have defensive defensemen that can focus on keeping the puck forward and clearing it out of their zone are going to be much more successful if the offense can handle their share and the defense can focus on defense. And I think that's a hard thing for Edmonton, because it seems like whenever people talk about defensemen for Edmonton, they're always talking about the Boosh bomb. So I'm curious how that's going to shake out.
Yeah, and I think team building wise, that's one of those things too where like I think you're generally right. Having more clear defined roles tends to lead to an easier run in the playoffs. Excuse
Yes.
me, where every minute matters.
Hmm?
But I think, if you got the right, if there was going to be another transcendent offensive defenseman and you got the right team builder out him, I don't think it would matter that much.
Yeah.
But I think now, especially, those guys aren't drifting towards defense or aren't staying there.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, because at some point in your journey, your team's gonna be like, we just need you to score goals. Stop sitting on the blue line. Just go closer.
Yes. Yes. So speaking of defenders being point producers and goal scorers, I think that's as good a segue as any to talk about the Avalanche lose in 7 games to the Dallas
Yeah.
Stars. That's a team that I think falls victim to exactly what I'm talking about. I'm not taking anything away from Cale Makar. He is a wonderful talent. Love the guy's game, but in a series where offense isn't producing, it puts so much pressure on him, and you see a lot of tension. It's almost like a tug of war for him to either have to buckle down and play defense, or I need to get on the board and help my team. And we saw him over the course of 7 games take over 70 shots, and it produced 1 empty net goal. And like it's awful. I mean, there's a lot of really cool stuff to take away from that series. We saw the return of Gabriel Landeskog, one of my favorite players. That's
Great
cool,
player.
but then on the other side of it, uh, you have Mikko Rantanen, who was traded from the Avalanche because the Avalanche. He was apparently and if I remember correctly, he was asking for too much money from the Avalanche. Like I think he was asking
That's
for like
correct.
something like 14 million a season or something like that. The Avs said, "How about like 12?" And he said,
Yeah.
"No, that's not enough." And they said, "All right, well,
I forget the exact numbers, but
we can't let you get to free agency, so we're going to get something for you." They trade him to what I believe is one of Colorado's biggest rivals, is the Dallas Stars, and this dude lights it up for, what was it, 12 points through 7 games or something like that.
it was crazy. He was
Yes.
unstoppable.
He
And
had
again, that
4
goes,
points in game 7.
you got to believe he had a chip on his shoulder too, of saying, you think I'm not worth this money? You got to play against me? That sucks.
Yeah,
Like, I'm going to show you
it sucks to
exactly
be you
why you
guys.
should have paid me that.
And
But yeah, I mean, again, great to see.
I
Go ahead.
love what Dallas has done over the last couple of years. They've had this wonderful veteran core of players who have been there, who know how to win. You look at your Tyler Sagans, your Matt Duchesnes, Jamie Benn is another good one. These guys who have been around for a while. Mikael Granlund as well. You have these guys that have been there for a while, who knows what it takes to be a locker room guy, to be a playoff winning team, and those guys are essentially like grooming the younger guys and teaching the younger guys how to become veterans in the NHL, and the younger guys end up lighting it up. I mean, who was it? Heiskanen last year. I could not stop watching that guy, and I love what Dallas has done. I think they're an electric franchise. I hate the green. I don't mind like the regular like clover, like emerald green, but like when you get to like the black jersey with like the neon green, not crazy
Yep.
about it. Or like the green LED lights that they have throughout their stadium. I hate it.
Yep.
It's very like build a stadium like in the video
But
games, but
yeah, but it's eye catching and it's different than football, right? Because in Texas,
yes.
that's all they're fighting against. They're just trying to
Yes.
draw eyes from football.
Mhm.
And
That's a
so,
good
like,
way to put it.
yeah, and there's the only other really green color I can think of in football in the state of Texas is University of North Texas.
Hmm.
But having that easily identifiable color scheme from far away probably is beneficial in their market.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think this was a perfect, like, this series was a perfect embodiment of, we're going to have one team that has done everything right leading up to this point versus a team that has made a lot of mistakes leading up to this
Mm-hmm.
point, and we're going to see how it goes. I personally was not a fan of a lot of the stuff Colorado did in the offseason. I thought for sure Landeskog was going to get dealt, cut, or something because he'd been away for so long. I'm glad he didn't, because I do, like I said, I do like him, but I don't like bringing in Ryan Lindgren. I wasn't really a big fan of his game in New York. I wasn't a big fan. I think they got Charlie Coyle in the Rantanen trade.
I think
Not a
so.
big
Yeah.
fan. Not a big fan of Charlie Coyle's game either. And then Nietzsche's, I believe they got him from Carolina.
Yeah.
I think so. I might be getting that confused with someone else, but like, I wasn't a huge fan with what they did. And then they had the Woods. They had Blackwood, they had Wedgwood, and then there was another Wood somewhere in there. But I don't think that Colorado really. I think Colorado failed to address their issues in goal, and I think they've kind of been fumbling ever since Kemper left 2-3 years ago. Whenever they won the cup last time, I feel like they've been fumbling to address that, and it's been their biggest issue, right? Like, they
Yeah.
were not able to close this series out. I mean, at one point they went up 3-0, had the game tied at 4 apiece, and had to win in overtime. Like, it's crazy. Like, they weren't able to just put a boot to the neck and close out a game, and it cost them the series.
Yeah. And I think I feel the same as sort of what you're saying with all these acquisitions is I think they sort of lost their core identity that got them to that sustained success. Like I
Yes.
think they've got like 5 or 6 pockets now that during the regular season, that's fine. As long as a couple people show up every night, you're talented top to bottom enough to win against most teams. But when you get into the playoffs and you need that killer instinct and that really strong, I think, team mentality and culture, that's where they sort of faltered.
Yes.
And I think it's going to be really tough to get that back with all those higher paid guys, without having to deal more of them, to be honest.
Yeah, because Landeskog is back and he's active. So I would love to see what his contract looks like and how that affects the team spending and who they bring in and their acquisitions in the next year.
Yeah.
Because they were benefiting from not having his salary on the books
Yeah.
for
The LTIR, which doesn't kick in for the
1,000
playoffs.
days.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how they navigate those, like, waters in the off season, because there's definitely a lot to do in that camp. So I'm anxiously nervous if I'm a Colorado fan moving into the off season, because I think there's a lot of issues, and which ones get addressed, if any of them, and which ones get addressed first, I think are going to be indicative of how next year is going to go for them.
Yeah, and I think they're going to get stuck in like a paralysis of choice scenario where there's probably 5 or 6 rational, good directions you could go in, but picking one and committing to it is going to be very difficult for them.
Paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more. Like, they need to pick a direction, they need to pick a road, and they need to walk it, for better or for worse, and ride it out.
Yep. And see
But
where they end.
I could see them, like, okay, let's start addressing the goalie issue, and then it's like, well, we have all these salary issues, let's jump over here for, like, I could see them losing focus. Yes.
Yeah.
I do
Well,
like
they'll
Jared
likely.
Bednar as a coach, though. I would like to see him stay.
Yeah. I mean, again, like they have great pieces. It's just whether or not they
100%.
can build that coherent vision again.
Yeah.
And again, maybe they'll pull it together for the next round and prove out it's wrong.
And then that takes us to the Stars are going to be waiting and watching tonight, May
Yep.
4th, to see who their dancing partner is going to be. Miraculously, the St. Louis Blues have brought the Winnipeg Jets to a Game 7, and that's going to get sorted out tonight. The big highlight in here that's, I think, all anyone will talk about, win or lose, for Winnipeg is, what is Connor Hellebuck's mental blockade in the playoffs? Why
He's
can
got the
this guy not
yips,
save a shot in the playoffs? It's like,
and it's
he's
fundamental
he's a
stuff.
he's a
He's
he's
off
a
his lines. He's
Vesna
off the post.
finalist. He's a Vesna finalist in the regular season, but then you put him in the playoffs and he's like the beer league guy. I don't understand it. He's supposed to
I
be
think.
possibly the greatest goalie, the greatest American goalie ever, and he
Yep.
can't get it done in the playoffs. What is going on?
I think it goes back a little bit to that mentality. I think that it's incredibly rare to have, the mentality to be a top level goalie, which he does have clearly. But then the playoffs is a whole other thing. And I think like goalies, you get in your own head, like you have a couple bad years and you're like, maybe this just isn't my thing. Like maybe, like I think you just start to doubt yourself, and then you're overthinking and instead of reacting instinctively to the puck, and you get lost.
Yeah.
And I feel so bad for him. I hate to see it. I feel bad for anybody in that position.
I mean, they haven't been able to close out St. Louis, letting St. Louis oust them 5-2 in game 6. I mean, St. Louis with their backs against the wall, this has been a back and forth series. And it's
I think
almost
St.
like
Louis is going to take it tonight.
and that would be a statement because they have to win in Winnipeg tonight to continue it. But I do think that I agree with you, Scott. I mean, it's coming to a head, and you got to think the longer this series goes on, more room for implosion there is on the side of Hellebuck and on the side of the Jets. I mean, St. Louis, we got nothing to lose. We brought the President's Cup winning team to Game 7. Let's go out there and have fun, right? Like, this is a win-win for us. Yeah, no one thought we could get here. We went on a 12-game win streak to make it into the playoffs, and now we're taking the President's Cup winning team to a Game 7. Like, what do we have to lose here?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because Winnipeg is, I think, the smallest market for an NHL team. It's not a big town. So when you're losing in the playoffs there, and if you live there, everywhere you go, everyone you see is a Jets fan because that's the only game in town. And so I can just imagine the pressure mounting on all of them of being like, oh my God, if we lose this, we are going to be
a bunch of people
for a couple months.
Shitting bricks all day today. I mean, the puck is going to drop here in the next 45 minutes.
Yep.
I'm going to be glued to this to see how this shakes out because it's going to be. I think this is going to be a good game, but I think it might be hard to watch. I think if St. Louis
Buck struggles in the first.
Yes. I mean, so let's. I want to go back through their results real quick. All right, so St. Louis wins Game 6 5-2. The Jets win Game 5 5-3. Going back a little further, the Blues win 5-1. I mean, this is insane. The Blues win 7-2. And then where's the first game? Jets win 2-1. I mean, so 3-4 goals is the number. It seems like if you score 3 or more goals, you're typically the winner in these games. So that's not a lot of room for error on the Winnipeg side. And aside from that one blowout that the Jets had over the Blues, Winnipeg or St. Louis, like you said, playing with house money. They got nothing to lose here. They weren't supposed to be here. No, they were supposed to be playing golf already. Like, so what do they have to lose? They're going to come out swinging.
And again, that's the people who smell blood in the water with a goalie who seems rattled. Like, they're just like, okay, like, you're not great. We're not that good. We're just going to throw everything we can at you, and we know we're going to get through eventually.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, pucks to the net. You throw pucks to the net, good things happen.
That's a real thing. When you see a goalie on an off day, you're like, it doesn't matter if it's good, bad, red or green, just throw it at him.
Yes. As long as something registers as a shot on goal, I like our odds.
Yeah. And even just, making him think more. The more he thinks, the more off he's going to get.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that's gonna do it for our our playoff roundup. Let's get into talking about some draft lottery because the draft lottery is gonna be aired Monday night at 7, right?
Yep, from Secaucus, New Jersey. Nick Secaucus. I think there's an ESPN headquarters there. But so it's the second time that the actual lottery, the ball numbers being drawn, is going to be shown live since 1995 when it first started airing. The 2020 pandemic was the other. And one of the big things, I think, behind this choice is that there have been a lot of conspiracy theories over the years when they pool the lottery numbers behind closed doors with a quote-unquote official witness. I think a lot of people think the powers that be for generational talents tend to direct them to markets they want them to go to. We haven't really seen a generational talent end up in a new or small market. The Phoenix Coyotes were never getting the first-round pick with the 1-1 overall when, a McDavid or anybody was available. And just a primer for everybody out there who doesn't know that much about it because it is a weird system. So all the
Yes.
teams that aren't eligible for the playoffs get entered into the lottery, and they have a certain number. There's 1,000 or 1,100 combinations of four numbers that can come out that are each assigned to a team. And the worst team, which this year is San Jose, has an 18.5% chance to win the first overall pick. So they have whatever that percentage is of those numbers are assigned to them, and then it goes down from there. So then the second is Chicago, 13.5. Nashville at 11.5, and the Flyers are fourth at 9.5. And the other interesting tidbit with this is you can only move up a maximum of 10 spots. So the 12th overall team, for example, if they win the first lottery, they get moved up to pick number 2, and then the Sharks would get the first pick. And then the
Okay.
lottery would go to the third pick. So that's a weird thing that I think a lot of other sports don't have, is there's
No,
just limited movement in the lottery.
it's usually
And
just you're the worst team, you get the first pick.
yeah,
That's what people are
and
used to.
yep. And it's sort of an interesting thing that they've toyed around with that we're actually going to talk about the PWHL next. But the PWHL for their draft does a thing where as soon as you're eliminated from playoff contention, they start like they call it the golden point, where whoever gets the most points after being eliminated from playoff contention gets the first overall pick. So it's supposed to, in theory,
Whoa.
eliminate tanking. So it's supposed to, even
Yeah,
after you get eliminated, try and make you want to win more games. So it's a cool concept.
that is a cool
And I think
concept. I really
it'll
like
be
that.
years, if ever, before the NHL decides to try that
Yeah.
for a newer league. And again, like theoretically, you'd think you'd sell more tickets if everyone thinks a team is actually trying and cheering for a win because the win gets them closer to a top pick instead of further.
It gives you something to play for as opposed to something to not play for.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like the Elam ending in basketball, where it's like
Yeah.
a logical, sensical way to manage it, that there's just so much momentum against it that it's going to be really hard to implement at the highest levels. Like I think
Okay.
the NIT tried the Elam ending this year. Obviously, the PWHL is already trying this golden point system. But again, because like it does make sense that you don't want a team to just be like, well, we can't win a game because then we're gonna lose
Yeah.
a percentage chance.
Yeah, like we see that in football a lot too, where like, oh, the Patriots were supposed to have the number 1 pick, but then they went ahead and they beat Carolina and they ruined it for themselves. Come on.
Yep, and
Like
set their franchise back.
I hate that dialogue. I hate that dialogue. Why would they win this game? This is what they're there
Yeah,
to do.
they shouldn't
What they're there to do.
objectively.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
as a Philly fan, that was the whole point of the process, right? Was to work within the league's rules, and the league stepped on that. But
so for
uh,
the NHL draft is like last year we saw Calabrini coming out of the draft and going to San Jose. He was kind of the big player to watch, excuse me.
yeah,
And then before that, it was Bednar going to Chicago. Is there a big name like a Bednar or a Calabrini coming out of the draft this year?
not to that level yet. So we just finished up the U18 World Championship, so that had a lot of prospects who sort of and what'll be interesting to see the after effect of that. I think we'll deal with that in the next one. Excuse me, sort of the upcoming prospects, but it's not a clear consensus franchise changing player in this draft. I think
Sure.
there's going to be a lot of good players come out. I think that, let's see, I have a list here that I've been putting together for it. Let me see if I can pull it up. Shockingly, there's a guy he's an American. I'm going to struggle to remember his name. But I think he's only like 5'7", which seems way too small.
That's like St. Louis sized.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's a 2026 draft, so it's possible.
Oh, okay.
Possible he'll grow, but it's just one of those things that you're like, maybe, maybe not.
Yeah.
We have to dig this list up for our next one, but
Yeah.
I think
No,
that'll
that's
be
fine.
the focus for our next one.
Okay.
But yeah, so
Well,
it'll be interesting to see how the lottery shakes out, and
you
I
got to
think
think that
Canada.
San Jose and Chicago like hoping, praying for everything to get to win the lottery, because you got to think that like their first round picks in Calabrini and Bedard
Beignets,
are
Bedard, yeah.
begging for some help, right? Like
Hmm.
I think those are teams that could dramatically improve should they
Yeah.
get another talent, because right now as it stands, like people aren't really lining up to get traded or acquired by the Sharks or the Blackhawks right now. So
No.
it would be nice to see one of those two teams win, because there is some star power that I think the NHL dramatically and drastically wants to support. Like
Yeah.
Bedard puts butts in seats. Calabrini puts butts in seats. Like I tune into games to watch those guys play. They're incredible. And they're like this new age of hockey player, right? Where a lot more like toe drag and whip style shooting. You know what I mean? Like, it's fun to
Yeah.
watch. And so I hope that we see some good supporting cast members go out to those organizations.
And the league has a vested interest in at least Chicago getting better, right? That's one of their historic big markets. Like, they really want Chicago to be good.
Yes. Yes.
San Jose,
They,
I'm sure they would say they want every team to be good. But again,
yeah.
like that's one of those little other little twists with the draft being actually televised is I think in previous years where it wasn't televised, be like, oh wow, who could have seen Chicago getting the first overall pick, and people would be like, I mean, yeah, of course, they're not going to give it to Nashville, they're not going to give it to San Jose.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool, shocker.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I
That's
think that's
funny.
a solid transition into our women's hockey highlight for the day.
Yeah,
So
let's do it.
the PWHL, the Professional Women's Hockey League, had 6 teams in their inaugural season last year. They'll be opening the new season with 8 teams. They have 2 new expansion franchises coming in Seattle and Vancouver. And so the expansion draft is going to happen in mid-June, which is going to be a tight turnaround for those franchises, as I would imagine they're still assembling their front of office teams. And then the entry draft for the PWHL this year is June 24th. And so talking back about the golden goal thing, one thing that is interesting to watch with that is with New York winning the golden point, golden goal thing to get the first overall pick, will the league give them the first pick and then give the franchises 2 and 3, or will they give the franchises a lottery chance with New York? And my leaning is that they'll give it to New York, because otherwise every other team would be like, okay, this system's just nonsense. There's no point in us participating in this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's an interesting
and
way to look at it.
Yeah, and the league's come out and said that their goal for the expansion draft is to have the new teams compete immediately and be in the hunt for playoff contention. And so we have 2 examples in the NHL of expansion drafts recently. The Vegas Golden Knights, who we've talked about how they've been consistent playoff performers, and
Yes.
the Seattle Kraken. And the Kraken expansion draft was much more restricted than Vegas's was. So I think the existing franchises were, and whether this is accurate or not, miffed because they felt like the Vegas team got too much of an advantage to compete right away. And so they want the Kraken to have that slower, longer build that most franchises have when they expand. And so that'll be interesting to see how the PWHA handles that. And it's also interesting because it's such a small league, more players on the roster, I think, are starting caliber.
Yes.
Even if you can protect your top 2 lines with fewer teams out there, I don't think there's necessarily fewer capable, top 6 players in a smaller league. They're just on lower lines. It's all just differentiated.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I think
No,
that's
you're
going to
right.
be fascinating to watch. It
Yeah, I
does seem like
think
there's an easier path to
how they
contention.
how they choose to address it, I think, is going to be like one of the most important things moving forward, because again, like you mentioned, Vegas has just been running the table. They're a team that you don't want to see in the postseason because they're always there and they know how to do it. They're built for it. Whereas like on the other side of that coin, like you said, the Seattle Kraken, they're about to have their 3rd coach in 3 years.
Yes.
Because Balsma's out. So I mean, it's a very, very fine line to walk. And like for me as a fan, I would much prefer that, like, maybe like let the expansion team be competitive. Then it's better for the league if you loosen up and let them be competitive, right? Because it grows that particular fan base and it makes the regular season much more fun to watch, and it drives engagement and it drives views. But I mean, that's just my school of thought. I'd prefer them to be competitive.
Absolutely. And the other interesting thing to watch with this expansion is that of the 6 teams they launched with, 5 of them are within 2 to 5 hour drive of each other. So we have the New York Sirens, we have the Boston Fleet, we have the Toronto Scepters, the Ottawa Charge, and the Montreal. I'm not going to read that. I think it's Victory in French. Victoire.
Victoire.
And then they do have the Minnesota Frost. So the Frost are the only ones in that cluster really out of driving distance.
Yeah.
But then adding 2 on the West Coast in Vancouver and Seattle is going to be interesting to see how that plays out, adding travel costs, travel time, time differences, really. Minnesota, they're probably in a different time zone, but it's just like interesting. And it'll be interesting to see how the league handles that, because I would imagine they're not flying private yet.
No, probably not.
So and commercial flights, particularly in the winter, into places like Vancouver and Seattle probably aren't the most consistent conditions to land in.
No, absolutely not.
So I don't know. I think that'll be
point.
a fascinating tidbit to watch, because I remember when Oregon was joining the Big Ten, and they said if you were flying commercially, so obviously not the football teams, it was
Yeah.
easier to get from Ann Arbor to London than Ann Arbor to Eugene, Oregon.
Jesus.
So it just feels like one of those things where it's like, okay, so you put most of these where they could drive to each other. And then you
Yeah.
put two, Minnesota, obviously huge hockey market town, everything should have a team. But Vancouver and Seattle are just interesting choices to me. Like I just don't know
Yeah.
what the other than getting a presence on the West Coast and potentially setting yourself up long term for like a West Coast fan base to expand more out there and not
Yeah.
try and be stuck sort of as a regionally based league. But it'll be fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when we talked about this in the last show, I was very interested and intrigued and invested in this league. The
Yep.
selling point for me was that they stream all their games for free on YouTube. I really like
Yep.
that.
I'm
So
gonna be
yeah,
watching a
I
lot this season.
yes, I am. I am as well. So I hope that, like these logistical things, especially like going with the draft, all of it. I mean, I'm sold on it. I'm excited. So yeah, I'll be tuning in a lot.
Yeah.
It'll be
And I
it'll be
think,
a fun watch, that's for sure.
yeah. All right. And I think we're on to our stat of the day, or stat of
Yeah.
the episode, more accurately, I suppose.
What are we
So
talking about?
talking about time on ice today, TOI, one of the older stats. So we're not
Yes.
too deep on the advanced stats yet, but this is truly just a measure of how long a player is on the ice for active gameplay. So
And
for
why
any
is
people
this
out there,
important? Why is this an important metric to track?
so in the old days, it was one of the only stats they tracked, and it sort of showed if you were a franchise player, a solid starter, a role player, etc. So for defensemen, for example, sort of like the baseline. Historically, you'd have 3 lines of starting defensemen. You'd probably bench 8 total. So you want to be in that 22 to 23 minute range is your top end starter. And one of the interesting things with this is there's time on ice per game. Then there's also ATOI, which is your average across the season. So that, helps account for injuries and other fluctuating situations and roles. Whereas if you just get blown out all the time, obviously the lower
Yeah.
guys are going to get more time. But it's interesting. We'll go into it more in the future with more advanced stats where you can see like, are they making the most of their ice time or are they just sort of eating minutes? So like Rasmus Ristolainen with the Flyers is a guy who, physical guy, not advanced stats darling, but eats a lot of minutes. On the Flyers though, who are a team at the moment. And so it's like, what is that worth versus a guy on, Darnell Nurse for Edmonton in this playoff series has been spectacular. And he's eating 22-ish minutes a game of really high level hockey. And so, like,
Yes.
having that guy back there and sort of goes back to what we were talking about with, like, that offensive defenseman, but having those, like, defensive defensemen eating big minutes out there lets everyone else just do their jobs. And so this used to be a really important stat and that people really cared about. And I think it's falling a little bit by the wayside with advanced nutrition and conditioning and more rest days and stuff like that. But I think it is just a really good starting point for people to start to understand how you measure impact on the ice because it's hard to have an impact without being out there.
Well, and like another aspect for time on ice to look at and consider is teams will target that stat, if they feel so. I think this is something that the Washington Capitals desperately needed and wanted to address in regards to John Carlson, one of the top defender on the team for so long. He's not getting any younger, but this guy was consistently putting up 22, 23, 24 minutes a game for a guy that, he's getting older. He's not out there because we want him to be out there. He's out there because we need him to be out there because we're not particularly deep at that position. And so it gave the Caps something to look at and target. Okay, we need to revamp our defensive pairings, and we need to get Johnny and our goaltenders, for that matter, some support. So they went out and they grabbed Jacob Chikrin. They signed Rasmus Sandin. They brought up Faravari from the AHL. So I think in that regard, there are times where you can see like, wow, this person is logging an insane number of minutes on the ice, and we need to cut that back, or we're gonna burn him up. It's not a good thing.
And you do see a lot of times, I think, particularly in defensemen, like that's when you start, particularly in the playoffs, is when you start to see that decline in the minute eaters, the elite defensemen. And we talked about Ekblad earlier in the season. It's sort of an interesting stat from the Panthers' first round, and obviously he's coming back from his PED suspension and also got suspended in the series. So there's a lot going on.
Yes.
But in 5-on-5 with Ekblad on the ice, the Panthers were outscored 4-1. And so obviously some of that's attributable to rust. Some of that's attributable to, factors outside of his control. But for one of those guys who's considered one of the premier defenders in the NHL, maybe you look at his time on ice and you're like, maybe we need a little less. Maybe we need to keep him fresher out there. Maybe we need to do X, Y, Z. Maybe he's not fully up to speed. Maybe he
Yes.
needs some more conditioning. But it's one of those things that you're like, oh, okay. So like when you combine that time on ice with these other stats, you sort of get to these decisions that can help in an ideal world. You shore up your issues,
Yes.
on the fly, and also long term, like you were saying with the Capitals, realizing that they need more help there. But yeah,
Yeah.
so time on ice is going to be one we talk about a lot going forward as it relates to other stats. But good just to give people, I think, a fairly comprehensive look at it.
No, I
And
love that. That's a good one. That's a good
so
stat.
we can I'll finish up with my roundup, which is going to focus on my Flyers. Fourth best chance to win the first overall pick. Philadelphia odds say they definitely won't do it because the gods hate us. But after they fired Torts, they did have a solid run. Matvei Mikov put up some of his best numbers of the season. Their right winger from Russia, which is great to see. And really, their biggest issue that they need to shore up is their goaltending. Their goaltending is an absolute disaster right now, and it's sad to see. Not sad. It's sad for the Flyers to see former Flyers like Stolars, who we talked about,
Yeah, that's tough.
doing great work out there when they could have put in one of those kid shooting drills. It's just the wooden board that has the holes in the corner and at the 5 hole, and probably would have been equally well off this season.
Damn.
It was bad.
Yeah.
It was real
Uh,
bad.
I'm not going to disagree with you, but I'm also not going to, shit talk your team, respectively.
Yeah, I get that.
You bring up a good point. But the Flyers, I think you said they have the fourth best odds to win the lottery.
For
So
the
they
first
do have
overall.
so they have the chance to get their ping pong ball drawn and move up
Yeah,
to that top spot.
9.5%.
That's tough. That's tough. So the Sharks have a double their ping pong balls
Yep,
pretty much. Oh, that's
pretty
tough.
much.
That's such a huge drop off.
It is.
Wow. That is a huge drop off. Wow. Well, best of luck to you and your Flyers.
Yep, we're bringing them back.
Yeah. For my roundup, I'm gonna go with a bit of a hot take. I'll never count a team out, right? I'll never say that they have absolutely no chance. But I was looking at the playoff field, and I really don't think that any West Coast team has a good chance of winning the cup this year. I've
Are you
I've been
including
I've
Vegas
been
in the West Coast?
I am. I think Vegas has the best chance out of anyone in the West Coast, in my opinion. But I honestly think that their series with the Oilers is going to be a rough one.
Mm.
But for some reason, it's just when I watch these like Western Conference teams, it just seems like there's just so much inconsistency, right? I mean, like you talked about Eichel earlier and how Eichel, you don't know which version of him you're going to get. And depending on which version you get dictates whether or not you win or lose the game. The Oilers, their goaltending issues are scary. I would have had the Kings winning and coming out of the West, but they had a really tough first round matchup with the Oilers and lost. The Stars, I don't like the numbers that the Stars put up defensively. I do like their ability to grind and battle back and stay in games, but I don't like, that you're in a position where you have to come back from being down 3-0 to tie the game and go to over. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
I feel like we're not really seeing that. I think the quality of play we're seeing on the Eastern Conference is so much better than what we're seeing in the Western Conference so far. Now, granted, I haven't tuned into every single game and I haven't watched every single game, but right now that's just my gut feeling is that the Stanley Cup champion will be hoisted and housed on an Eastern Conference team this year.
I like it.
I'm unimpressed with what's going on in the West. I think there's a lot more glaring inconsistencies and red flags in the West than there is in the East right
Yeah, I mean, if I was going to pick my top three right now to go all the way, I'd be in the same camp. It'd be Panthers, Caps, and Carolina. So I think
now.
I'm in
Yeah.
the same camp, and it's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, I think it is too. But yeah, that's my roundup. Nothing really team specific, but more
Yeah,
just kind
I
of
like it.
like
We love,
I'm all in on playoff hockey right now, and so like that's just
yeah,
kind of where my head is at any moment of the day.
yeah, we love hot takes.
Yes, yes we do.
We're all
All
good.
right.
All right, well, this was another great episode.
Yeah, anything else before we
And
wrap up?
I think we're all set, other than saying I think we'll be back pretty soon for some more playoff updates.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I mean that's going to do it for us here at What Caught My Eye Hockey. I'm Stephen Komlo with the Bear Scott Griswold. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. If anybody, by the way, if anybody finds themselves with tickets to a playoff game, reach out to us on social media. You can find us on TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook, and X. Reach out to us on one of those social media platforms, and we'll send you some koozies, some stickers to take to the game with you and take pictures. If you send us those pictures, we'll post them on our stories for you. But until next time, tune in, take care of each other, be decent to each other, and we'll talk soon. Bye.
Yep.